If this works. If not, we have the one from my semester. All right. So I pulled up the document. And it's kind of what I'll use for the review. So So this is kind of the breakdown. All right, we're having just no luck today with technology. Bad technology. All right, here we go. The rest of the day, I guess I'm going to walk home tonight. I'm not sure I want to be around anything that, you know. What's that?
You want to be around anything else?
No, not really. Not that my, you know, pickup has an overwhelming amount of it, but there is electricity that it generates, and I think that might be. So these are the different modules. So we didn't really talk too much about 17. So I'm going to start with 17 and then jump back up to the top. But this is the breakdown. One of the nice things that they're not requiring is to calculate the numbers between decimal, binary, and hexadecimal. So don't worry too much about that when you take the final. And I'll write myself a note so I don't forget. I'll post this up on Blackboard. They kind of have an idea. Today is the 11th. Today is Wednesday. And note here, post. Black. All right, very good. So, kind of how I'm going to do the review. Before I left work today, I did post the previous semester's review when we were in class. And then I also posted the video lectures from the spring 2021, so a year ago, back when we were still remote. So if there's something that you missed that you're not completely clear on, you can always go back and replay those. What I would suggest you do, there's 3 links. There's a link for, you know, you just. So there's the 3 links. For whatever reason, Google took Blackboard took the links and puts them like this with no description and no way to edit it. So I just put the links a second time down here. So you've got the PDF versions of the notes from spring of 2021. You've got the final review from December of 2021. And then you've got the videos from the spring of 2021. If there's a certain topic that you need more review time with, what I would do is go here to the PDF versions, find the material that you're looking for, and then match the data. Because if we go, the videos are all dated. So if we say, you know, you find the topic that we covered, let's say we happen to have covered it on, you know, the 12th of April last year. You go through here, you find it. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to search it. But here we're talking about broadcast domains versus collision domains and stuff. Now you can say, okay, this was done on the 12th of April, then you can go back here and find the video from the 12th of April. Then you go, oh, look, this video right here, 12th of April. Then you can kind of play it back. Listen to it. Ignore the times. They're all off by 3 hours because Google uses UTC, not regular. So we weren't doing class at 1:15. These are incredibly slow to buffer. For whatever reason, Google owns YouTube. Anything through YouTube is like lightning fast. Anything that comes out here, and ignore my students. Ignore my students.
That's off your machine. So they yes.
And there's me drinking alcohol at its best.
Way intersection.
But you could kind of go back through and slow it down, speed it up. I don't know why you'd want to slow it down, but you can speed it up. Right. So you could go back and look through those. And then the third link is the same thing as we're going to do today. It's a review of the final. There's me with my wipes as usual. And I think we had the same weirdo angle last semester too. I think that's the same crappy camera. So you could go back through and take a look at this. And just to verify, just want to make sure that the way I'm recording, I'm actually recording. All right, here we go. Definitely working as perfect as technology can be. All right, so we said that we've got these topics. So this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to start with 17, and then I'm going to work my way back. So 17 talks about troubleshooting connectivity on a small network. And they talk about some of the utilities to use and some of the ways to determine if there's really an issue. Because one of the things that, and I know I've said this before, that drives me bonkers about networking is people will come to you and they'll say the network is slow. And that is of no use to me. Because you come to me and you say the network is slow, I'm immediately going to say to you, and I'm very good with users. I've always taken pride in the fact that I'm not insulting, which, it takes quite a bit of effort sometimes. I'm very, I understand that everyone has their own specialty, and the woman that deals with, doing all the ordering for special ed and making sure that all the kids that have special, requirements get those requirements. That's her specialty. If you put me into that job, there would be quite a learning curve, and she's done it for years and she's very good at it. So I've always had respect for the fact that just because I'm good at this stuff doesn't mean you're an idiot because you're not. We're all good at different things. So I'm not about to go into if I go into the eye doctor and the eye doctor can't get their computer to turn on, I'm not going to think, wow, this person's a generic idiot. They know eyes far better than I'll ever know eyes. They've seen stuff that we give them creepy nightmares concerning eyes. So just that is kind of a caveat. People will come to you and they'll say, the network seems slow. And my immediate thing is, well, what are you doing that it seems slow? Is it a certain website? Is it a certain time of the day? When's the last time you rebooted your computer? Are you on wireless? Are you on wired? Have you tried other websites? All this information that, without it, you're never going to solve the problem. So they talk about some of the ways to gather this information. And one of the things that they talk about is benchmark. And how if you're going to benchmark your network, you need a reference point. And it's often difficult to get a good reference point for a network. And there's utilities that you can buy or utilities that are open source that you can download that will assist you with this. There's a lot of really good ones. Some of them have been around forever and a day. There's a piece of software that's called Nagios. And Nagios has been around since I worked here on campus. So we're talking, 20 plus years. Nagios has been around. And there's software like Cacti. and then probably 900 other open source packages. And these open source packages will allow you to benchmark your network. And the hardest part about benchmarking a network is getting an accurate baseline, because the question always is, well, when do I take my baseline readings? And in our network, depending on the time of the day and the time of the year and the day of the week to some extent, we will have different types of network usage. Our users start to trickle in about 6:15. The high school teachers love to get there at like the absolute crack of dawn. Right, so 6:15, we start to see a little bit of network usage. Then our network usage goes up quite a bit at 7:20 when the high schools start. Then there's even more network usage at about 8:10 when the middle schools start. And then at about 9:15 when the elementary schools come online, we have even more network usage. So we need to determine when to get a good baseline. We don't want to get a baseline at 7 a.m. because at 7 a.m. the high school kids aren't there yet. We don't want to get a baseline at 3 o'clock, though, because the high school kids have left for the day. We don't want to get a baseline at 12 noon because around 12 noon, a lot of the kids are eating lunch. So you need to kind of have almost rolling baselines or several baselines where a user can come to you and say, and this would be the perfect user. At 11:15 in the morning, I always have some problems getting to certain devices or certain parts of the website or whatever it is. I can then say, all right, what day was it? Oh, well, it was last Monday, last Tuesday, but it was okay on Wednesday. All right, what was happening on the network on Monday and Tuesday? And I can go back and look. And so if you have more granular baselines, it makes it a little easier. You can just have, broad baselines, but just be aware that if your network has different peaks, it's very hard to compare. If the user said, well, every day I stay late, every day at 4:15, I go on this website, and then we look at the baseline, and the baseline, was taken at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the data is not going to be relevant to us. We're going to say, wow, actually at 4:15, you were at 15% usages compared to the peak, so there was nothing wrong on the network. Meanwhile, maybe there was, but because we're not using an accurate baseline, it kind of hurts us. So with benchmarking, we use the concept of baseline. And baseline is, obviously exactly what you think it is. It's a reading when nothing is wrong. It's to find, it's to find your average usage. And there's a ton of tools that you can use for this. Again, there's open source utilities. There's utilities that you can buy where you do the installation. There's cloud-based services where your devices just send data up to, a server that someone else manages, and they do all of the computation and give you these nice readings. The more you are able to control it and fine tune it, the better it is for everybody, but that comes with the cost of now I need someone to manage it, right? And so just as a real quick example, and then we'll right on. We've got this piece of software that's called Airwave. Airwave watches all of our wireless activity, right? And Airwave is a great piece of software because Airwave allows me to do this. So Airwave has this utility that's called Visual RF. And what Visual RF does, I'm just looking for a good one. Not a great one, but yeah. So what Visual RF allows me to do, Visual RF allows me to have what's called a heat map, where I can see based on my rooms what the signal strength is. The other thing that it allows you to do that's really neat is it will triangulate where devices are. So I think the other picture showed it a little bit better. You know what? That shows it even better. So here we've got a bunch of rooms, right? They have no room numbers on them. But I can triangulate from the access points where devices are. So if I think that student devices are connecting to the wrong wireless access point, I can click on these devices, find the student ones, and see what access point they're connecting to, or where they are in relation to the access point. So Airwave is really, really nice. The problem with Airwave is there's a lot of setup. We're talking days and days of configuration in the beginning to get everything to work the way that you want it to work. Airwave is also extremely expensive. So there's these open source tools that, again, are free of charge, and some of them are just as good as their commercial counterparts. Then there are, paid software that you can run on your own network, or there's cloud-based stuff that you can run that you do, minimal management. The reason I bring up Airwave is I went to log into Airwave today, and I went to find where a device was, and I got an error that the database is corrupt. You go, you start to look it up. It's like a 3-hour event to fix the database. You've got to dismount everything. You've got to jump through hoops, and you've got to stand on one leg, and you've got to do this, that, and the other thing. If that was cloud-based, I would just open up a ticket with the provider and say, the database is, bonked. Could you fix it for me? But there's an advantage to letting someone else manage it. But, All right, so back here. So some of the other things they talk about with troubleshooting connectivity, they talk about some of the utilities you can use. They make a lot of use of the ping utility. Ping sends an echo request, and the other side sends back an echo reply. Then there's a utility called Traceroute. Now, Traceroute, and I like to ask a question about this, Traceroute is a full command on Cisco, Linux, and Mac OS. On Windows, it's TRACERT, and it's an executable. So it's TRACERT.exe, although you can just do TRACERT, and TRACERT, automatically, because with Windows, if you type in executable without the .exe, it automatically tries it with the extension. And the way the Traceroute works, so there's a concept with routing that's called the TTL. And the TTL, or the time to live, is a value that is decreased or decremented by 1 at each router. So the easiest way to show you is just to show you. Oops. So if we trace the route somewhere, so let's trace the route to Google's DNS server. And it actually, what we want to do, let's do this. If we turn off name resolution, it goes much faster. -D. Yeah. So what this is going to do is it's going to trace the route from our network over to Google's DNS server. So you see that it happened in 8 hops. So my device first sent the packet to the router for this network. The router for this network sent it to the router at the edge of the Farmingdale network. It then jumped through a couple of other networks until it got to Google. That's Traceroute. The way that Traceroute works. So it works by sending a ping with the TTL of 1. Then it gets a response and sends again with a TTL of 2. It then repeats that until it gets destination. And what happens when you send something with a TTL that's too low is you get a message that says TTL expired in transit. So if we look at ping, ping has a bunch of different options that we can use, right? The one that we want to use is this -I. So we're going to say ping 8.8.8.8 minus I1. And we get a message from the Farmingdale router. Now you'll notice that's the same, and let's screenshot this just so I don't have to go back and forth 12 dozen times. Let's screenshot that. Put that there. Now I got a response from the first router. That first router matches that. Now I'm going to do it with a 2. So I'm going to say set the TTL to 2. Now the TTL is going to be decreased when it goes through the first router, and now the second router is going to reply back. So now we get a message from the second router. This matches the second router, right? 253.9. When we do this, we'll do it 2 more times. We should get a response back from 199, 109, 104, 125, and 199, 109, 107, 166. Because each time we increase, we go 1 router further. So there's the third router. There's the fourth router. And those should match. If they don't, it's only because it picked a different path. No, they match perfectly. So that's router 4. Let's do 5, 6. Let's do 7. And we'll see that we'll get, when we tell it pass through 7 routers, we get a response from 142, 250, 165, 113, which matches this network. So what a traceroute does is it sends a series of packets and it sets the TTL increasing each time. First time it sends it with a TTL of 1, then a TTL of 2, then a TTL of 3. And because each router that receives this where the TTL expires says, hey, the TTL expired in transit, your device says, oh, by the way, let me grab the name, let me grab the IP address from that message, and then it's able to build the topology from point A to point B. So that's Traceroute. Traceroute is very handy when you're trying to figure out where the issue is, because you get some other numbers here. So those are all pretty low. You know, the request comes back from my local router in less than 1 millisecond, comes back from the next one in 1 millisecond and 2 milliseconds. You know, none of these are tremendously, you know, large numbers that we're talking about. However, if we say traceroute sony.co.jp, which is Sony's website in Japan, or Sony's domain in Japan, you'll see that these numbers will get a lot bigger. Because as soon as we start to go overseas, see how they jump to 9 milliseconds, 9 milliseconds. Sometimes you'll get a router that doesn't reply back when you get the TTL when the TTL expires. That's what happens here. A lot of companies turn off the ability to see that you're routing traffic through them. It's a little bit of pain in the backside when you're trying to troubleshoot something, but not uncommon at all. And we should see that catch up. So we'll let that finish. That's Traceroute. So those are really the biggies that that they want you to know for this module. Let me just let that finish. That is still going. Put that in there. Just want to make sure there's nothing else major that, and then we can jump back to the top. Ping baseline, show up. Oh, CDP. So okay. So the other big concept for this module is the concept of what's called CDP. And what CDP is. So there's CDP, which is the Cisco Discovery Protocol. Then we have a protocol that's called LLDP. LLDP is the link layer discovery protocol. The Cisco Discovery Protocol is proprietary. However, Cisco does not enforce the proprietary nature of it. Meaning, if I'm a competitor of theirs and I want my devices to read CDP messages or send messages in a similar format to CDP, Cisco doesn't step in and say, oh, no, we're not doing that. You're violating some rule. They're fine with it. So CDP is a Cisco Discovery Protocol. It is Cisco proprietary, but again, they don't really enforce that proprietary nature of things. And then there's the link layer discovery protocol. Link layer discovery protocol is an open standard. What these both do, these both operate at layer 2. Meaning, I don't need a device to be properly configured to be able to see the other device. So the way that CDP works is CDP and LLDP, they both send messages periodically, advertising. They advertise the port number they're connected to. They advertise the platform. They advertise the version that they're running. They advertise their host name. They advertise their features. Am I an access point? Am I an IP phone? Am I a router? Am I a switch? And these messages let you very easily see what's connected to your ports. I can say, all right, port 6 is connected to this router, and I know it's connected to this router because when I log into the router and I say show CDP neighbors, it gives me the interface on the other side and vice versa. So CDP is extremely handy. And again, CDP is Cisco proprietary, but I can log into an Aruba switch and say show CDP neighbors, and I can see the CDP neighbors. I can log into a Brocade switch, or I could log into most of their competitors speak CDP, and then everybody speaks LLDP. LLDP has a little bit nicer format to it, gives you a little bit better information, but it's really, you can really use, you can really use either. Any questions so far?
What did you say about them having to be configured, that they don't have to be configured?
They don't, no, out of the box. In fact, the only thing you'd ever do as far as configuring them is maybe turn them off. What you don't want is something like this. So you've got your internal network. Then you've got, let's say, a connection to somebody else, right? So maybe this is a connection to some, this is some partner. And then you've got your connection out to the internet. Maybe on that interface to the partner network, you might turn off CDP so that they can't see, any information about your device. And you can turn CDP off on an interface by interface basis. So I would go into that interface that's connecting to that other, network, and I would say no CDP enabled. And that's it. Turns off CDP on that interface. No LLDP enabled. Turns off LLDP on that interface. And now we're not going to advertise what the model of this is or anything else, because you will get cases where certain models have certain vulnerabilities. Maybe you haven't gotten around to patching for it yet. Or maybe, it's a 0-day exploit where you don't know that there's an exploit until there's already been a tool written that attacks the vulnerability. In that case, it's probably a bad idea to be advertising what kind of device it is, because maybe it's a vulnerable device. And if it's a vulnerable device, somebody could have already attacked somebody on that partner network, and now they're going to use that partner network as a jump off point to get to your network. So it's probably a good idea to have CDP turned off on any other facing, any other facing.
That just turns on.
It's on automatic. Yeah, it's on automatic. And it's, there's never been any, other than somebody discovering something that they shouldn't, or discovering a model that they shouldn't, or something like that. There's not too much you can do. The only thing that I've ever read that people have done is you'll get certain people that'll be confined to a certain network, right? A certain subnet. If they can look at that information and they say, oh, the person at the other desk is able to, get onto whatever websites they want to get to, but I can't, they could look at that and say, oh, their device is connected to port 4 in the wiring closet. I'm connected to 14, and if they can get into the wiring closet, they could switch the cables. Highly unlikely to happen, but there's always the potential. But any questions so far? All right. So they talk a lot about some of the trends in networking. Most of them are going to be painfully obvious. Things like how networks have changed the way that we do everything. And this curriculum was written pre-pandemic. So they had no idea, it's only become even more obvious what we do with networks. Prior to the pandemic, the idea of people working from home was always kind of a, and then again, now it's become a weird issue again. But it's always, a weird issue. Oh, how are you going to work from home? People aren't going to get as much done. Then when businesses were all forced to close and have their employees work from home, they said, oh, this work from home stuff, that's actually going to work because we're being forced to do it. So, the way that we work changed, and the way that we play changed, the way that we interacted with people changed. And, you had, Zoom weddings and, all this, weirdness, Zoom classrooms and everything else. And when I say Zoom, I'm, kind of like people that, or not that I don't do it myself, people that say Kleenex instead of tissue. When we use the word Zoom, we're really referring to all the platforms that do it. Somehow, this company that nobody had ever heard of before, Zoom, wound up being like the word that we use to describe video conferencing. Zoom was not a big player. You had WebEx, you had Google Meet, you had there's another one that's similar to WebEx. It's not really important what we're talking about. There was another like biggie. Skype certainly. Yeah, Skype's not the one I was thinking, but certainly Skype was a huge. The Teams, you had one more. It'll come to me. It's done. You had GoToMeeting, Citrix GoToMeeting. So you had all of these all of these changes, and now the fact that they even ask questions about it, it's like a giveaway question, right? Because how does networking affect the things that we do? Well, it affects everything, right? Some of the things that people don't give as much thought to, and it's two of the big things that they like to kind of jump on for questions, are the concepts of BYOD and cloud computing. So BYOD can become a nightmare for network engineers because, where I am, we have a combination of Chromebooks. Every student in the district, every student from kindergarten through 10th grade, right? Because we gave them to the 9th graders. Every student in kindergarten through what are now 10th graders have Chromebooks. Then your 11th graders and 12th graders, they still have Windows-based. Stuff. But we have, Windows machines that we administer. We have Chrome devices that we administer, and we have a lot of control over them. We can control what people can do on them, what applications they can run, what websites they can go to. We can control quite a bit. And it's necessary that we do that because it prevents people from either intentionally or non-intentionally running malicious code, right? Because maybe somebody went out to a website on their personal device when they were at home and they got infected with something. And because we don't have control over that machine, we want to make sure that when that machine comes on our network, that we isolate it. So that's where BYOD comes from. The way a lot of companies stupidly did BYOD is they just said, oh, bring your device and connect them to the network. And then they learned their lesson very quickly because you had these devices that were compromised that would then immediately, as soon as they connected to the network, would start looking for vulnerable hosts. And maybe you weren't as good about running Windows Update as you should. Or maybe you weren't as good about, turning off certain features as you should have been. Now you've got a device where you can't say, well, somebody could never bring in malware because we manage everything. You've got an unmanaged device on your network. So that's BYOD. BYOD is bring your own device. And what most network engineers will do is they will set up a separate network for that. They will set up a separate network, either virtually or sometimes physically, and they will isolate that network from their internal network. The thinking is we make that network the equivalent of a person connecting from the internet. So when our users, our teachers and our students, when they bring in their own phones, they log in so we know who they are, and we put them on a separate network. Not a physically separate network, but a logically separate network, and they only have the same ability as if they were connecting from outside of our network. So if they're sitting at home or they're sitting in a classroom, when they're using their own device, they have the same privileges as if they're at home. Versus if they log onto their Windows machine, they get the privileges to do, what they need to do. So they don't have full control, but we've isolated them to the point where if somebody comes in with a device that's infected, they not only can't infect any of our production, servers, workstations, etc., but we also make it so that they can't infect each other. Everybody that comes in goes on what they call a private VLAN or their own virtual local area network. So if Joseph and Janine both bring in a device and Joseph's device is crawling with malware and Janine just bought this device, she's opening it for the first time, so it's got a version of Windows on it that maybe doesn't have all of the Windows updates, Joe's machine can't attack Janine's machine and do something bad to it because we isolate them from each other as well as isolating them from our production network. It's the only way to do it where you're not going to have, one machine that, because again, you've got these 0-day exploits or these 0-day vulnerabilities where it's a vulnerability that was discovered that the antivirus, anti-malware companies don't know about yet. So, some vulnerability that, has been shared among hacking groups, but has not been shared with the vendor, or it's been shared with the vendor and the vendor hasn't patched for it yet, which you'll occasionally find. And it's kind of there's two sides to whether or not it's like I don't know a better way to say, a wrong thing to do. You'll get certain groups that will find these vulnerabilities that will let the vendor know and will give the vendor a time. So they'll say, all right, Apple, we found a vulnerability in, iOS, whatever version of iOS they're on. You've got 30 days to patch it before we tell everybody. And then Apple goes, okay, we'll do that. And if they don't patch it or they don't think it's worth, writing the code for, 30 days later, that goes out as a public exploit. Now, during those 30 days, these hacking groups, you know, who are, you know, the majority of them for what they do are upstanding people. You know, they're good at that. All right, we know there's a vulnerability on every iPhone that's running, you know, X.Y, but we're going to sit on it and let Apple fix it. You still may get one bad apple, though, that's part of one of these groups that says, hey, you know what? It would be really interesting if I was able to get onto, you know, my ex, you know, boyfriend or girlfriend's phone and do something, so I'm going to do that. And that's how you know you've had these giant leaks before. Those are zero-day exploits. The antivirus companies don't know about them. The anti-malware companies don't know about them. The intrusion detections don't know about them. Those are the most dangerous. You know, and that's how you have things like, anybody remember the celebrity devices that all got hacked? They called it the fappening. I always get chuckle because I think it's a silly thing. But they got like a ton of phones and stuff, right? They got Jennifer Lawrence and this one and that one, and you know, they found some, you know, I don't want to say compromising photos, but they found some intimate photos and videos on some of these people's, you know, some of these people's devices, and it was all traced back to an iCloud vulnerability. Well, you know, maybe Apple knew about it and hadn't patched for it yet. Maybe they didn't know about it. In any event, there was nothing to prevent somebody from going in, however they went in and getting this information. And it was a lot of celebrities that it happened to. It was like, oh, see, that's why we do not do these things with the projector on, because the first one that came on would have gotten me fired. I just wanted the darn. All right, in any event, we're not looking it up because we can't. I was just trying to find the number of people that it affected, but we're not doing it. Because the first one that came up was, you know, seeing more of someone than I should be seeing. So that's BYOD. You know, BYOD is huge because everyone wants to put their devices on the network. Especially if you work in an area where, you know, I don't know if I've mentioned this before. We've got fallout shelters in some of our schools where we have equipment. I don't get a cell signal in there. I couldn't, you know, if that, some of those have doors that are like that. That door closed, I couldn't get a signal to have someone come in and save me. They would eventually, you know, granted, I have a little bit of a belly, so I survived for a couple days. Having no water is what would kill me. And we have wireless in there for this reason. In certain places that really poor signal and people want to use your wireless rather than using your rather than using their own data plan. That's where BYOD becomes huge. All right, so then the other one is cloud computing. And remember, the key to cloud computing is you are using someone else's equipment. Someone else is managing this. It's somebody else's problem. You are not putting this big outlay of money in order to, you know, have this resource.
This is the only day the entire semester.
I just been taking it the entire semester. Just don't understand. So. Yeah. I love it because I prefer to exactly. Yeah. And this is like the free load. It's like I've thought about like where you can get these screens, but that's a lot of yeah, it's just one. It's the one. It's good. Yeah. Just not powerful. Yeah, it's hard.
built the roof season.
Yeah, I would do that.
Attempts as well.
It is like an oven up here near the instructor station. In fact, just so the camera can see, it is 84 degrees up there. I'm dying.
This isn't what?
It's- So you're using someone else's equipment. You're using somebody else's resources. And the thought behind it is maybe I don't have the ability to do this, or maybe it's cheaper to do. Right? And there's two types of clouds. There's what's called a private cloud and a public cloud. Because it's not only the ability to use somebody else's equipment, it's also the ability to shift workloads. So for example, where I work and what they have here at the college and what we had at my previous district and what most companies have at this point is a private cloud. And this private cloud, years and years and years and years ago, when I was back in, when I was back in Baldwin in the mid 2000s, we had 63 physical servers at one point because we had 4 email servers and we had web servers and we had servers for transportation and for all of these different Read 180 and NWEA and all these servers, right? Just like 2 full racks of servers. Modern networks don't have that anymore. And we moved off of that around 2008. We started, and by 2010, we were off of that because each of those servers, we didn't utilize the CPUs fully. We didn't utilize the RAM fully. And we had the issue of if the transportation server went offline, now we've got to rebuild it from backup. What you do with a private cloud is you virtualize your servers. So rather than having, 60-something physical servers, you prune it down to about 8 or 9 physical servers, and now those physical servers can run multiple instances of either Windows or Linux or whatever you're running. The beauty of that, and where I am now, they had about the same number of servers in Levittown as we had in Baldwin. We're similar sized districts. Levittown's got about 2,000 more students. Baldwin has more elementary schools, but Levittown has more high schools and middle schools. Levittown's got 2 high schools, 2 middle schools. Baldwin had 1 high school, 1 middle school, but we have more elementary schools in Baldwin. So I think we just have bigger. I think Baldwin just has a bigger high school and middle school, so that's why they only need 1 of them. But in any event, in Levittown we have 9 physical servers. If one of those servers is having a problem, we can transparently move the running instance of Windows or the running virtual machine to another piece of hardware, to another server. We don't have to take it offline. We don't have to do anything. In fact, we don't have it set up like this, but it's one of the goals for this summer because now that energy, costs are back through the roof. You can set it so that during the night or during, your non-peak times. So for us at Levittown, it's like the weekend. We don't need 9 physical servers with all of these virtual instances running. So you can prune that back and you can set it so automatically, 6:30 on Friday night, it moves all of your running instances to like 2 or 3 physical servers and it puts the other 6 to sleep. So it's a tremendous power savings. I can move resources. I can move it's shared storage. The storage is, movable. That's all a private cloud. We still have complete control of it, but it's set up like cloud-based computing where I can move resources at will and I can spin up new virtual machines at will or take down virtual machines at will, etc. Then there's a public cloud. And you can use a public cloud in a number of ways. You can run servers. You can use them for storage. You can use them for services that you don't have the expertise to do yourself. For example, Amazon's got this really cool service where I can upload pictures to it and it will do all kinds of analysis, facial recognition, all this stuff. And they had this free service that they were letting people use, when schools went back in September 2020, where schools could upload footage from their surveillance cameras. And no one took advantage of this, by the way, because no one was comfortable with Amazon's, privacy policies. But they did make the offer. You could upload footage from your video cameras, and it would tell you if it saw people with no masks on. This was back when masks were, mandated in school. So I could upload footage from my video camera, and you couldn't upload a lot of it. If you have a video camera that's getting like 30 frames per second, I think they limited it to like 2 frames per second. But it was enough that you got the general idea, and it would tell you, do I see exposed faces? And if it saw the exposed faces, it would make a little thumbnail of that face. So you could look and see, was it a false positive? Is it, is there a problematic, somebody that, is violating the policy? Again, very few people took them up on it. But that might be something that you don't have the ability to do yourself. If I wanted to use that, it is a bit big brotherish, but putting that aside, if I wanted to do that, I don't have the expertise to set that up. So I use somebody else's resources to do that. So with the public cloud, we've got servers, we've got storage, and we've got other services. Facial recognition, data warehousing, and everything in between. And the key again is maybe I don't have the resources to do this myself, or it's not worth my time to do it myself. The example that I give to people is photographs. I've got 2 kids, and we've got, tens of thousands of photographs. I've got photographs of things that I scanned, photos that I scanned that predate the digital camera. And then from 2001 on, I've got digital photos. I've got boatloads of digital photos, most of which I couldn't give a hoot about. But there are, a percentage of those that are very important to me. So while I could set up my own server with a backup tape and everything else, it's not worth the time. I pay Google nothing because they do it for free. I pay Amazon a little bit of money for some extra storage, and the photos they'll do for nothing. If you have a Prime membership and the storage, which really you only pay for the videos once they go over a certain amount, it's a small amount of money. And then, we have an iCloud family account that we pay to all of our phones automatically get backed up. That backs up all of our pictures. So I've got my pictures backed up in a couple of different places for a very small amount of money, compared to having a server, having to have that server on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That server is going to consume power. That server is going to need updates done on it. That server is going to need, I don't bother with any of that crap. Let someone else do it. I'd rather pay, if it was a lot of money, I would say to myself, all right, probably better do it myself. It's not a tremendous amount of money. The iCloud for the family plan, I think we pay like $10 a month. And it's not just for photos, it's like 2 terabytes. So our phones get backed up and, we've got our own private domain go, we got all kinds of stuff, right? The Amazon for the extra storage, I think is like $4 a month. Again, $14 a month, $14, still $14. I could likely do something better with. However, it's not worth $14 a month. Maybe I pay an extra $6 a month in electricity if I have my own server. So right there, we're talking an $8 a month difference, right? Now I've got to buy hardware. So if I've got to buy a piece of hardware, I've got to buy, let's say, a $400 piece of hardware. That's 50 months right there before I set the software up or do anything else. Then I've got to have a way to back it up. Now I've got to buy a tape drive. Maybe a tape drive is another $400. So now I've got 100. I've got 100 months until I get a return on my investment. That's what makes cloud computing so appealing to people, because they go, oh, wait a minute, I could spend a lot of money and expend a lot of resources where somebody else could do it. So that's where people go, oh, let's do the cloud. All right, any questions on that?
How secure are this?
Some of them are very, others, as we saw with this happening thing. And again, the happening thing, I was still in Baldwin when that happened. So I left Baldwin in 2015, so it was at least 7 years ago. But it shows you that someone can figure out a way to exploit these things, very easily. And the other problem is, all right, so and I'm a little old for doing the whole, like intimate photo kind of thing. No one would want, really, no one's going to want to see those things. But anyone who works at Amazon, or a group of people that work at Amazon, and a group of people that work at Apple, and a group of people that work at Google, do have access to those photos, my files. You just have to assume that, there are certain safeguards in place. Because I'll give you a real like 5-second example, and then we'll come back to this. We have OneDrive at work, right? Much like they do at Garmin. So with OneDrive, all of our students have a OneDrive account. All of our faculty, staff, everything has a OneDrive account. I can see any user's files on that OneDrive account. I can go in, because I'm an administrator, I can go in and I can go into their account and I can say, something, browse files, whatever. I click on it and a link is generated. I can click on that link and I can see all their files. However, it is heavily audited. If I do that, my boss gets an email and 2 of my coworkers get an email for every file that I access. So unless we have a really good reason to do that, we don't, because there's an audit trail. And if some user someday, says, oh no, something was leaked and it was only saved on my, Levittown OneDrive, it's not hard for them to, so they say, oh, I had a picture and, you could see, X, Y, and Z on whatever, and I'm going to sue you. Okay, we didn't do it, and we know we didn't do it because there's no audit. We would have gotten an audit message. They would then, as part of the lawsuit, they would subpoena Microsoft for a copy of those audit logs. And then they could very easily see not only what of theirs we've looked at, but they'd also be able to see what else of other people's we've looked at. And now, if some teacher did that and said, oh my God, look at these, people, they're looking at all of our files, it becomes a huge, huge problem for us. So the auditing kind of keeps everybody honest. People for years, teachers have always, 5 seconds, sir. One of my coworkers stupidly told one of the users, they said, this was when I first started, you've got this new guy. I see you have a new guy. Yeah, his name's Robert, blah, blah, blah. Well, what is it going to have him do? Well, he watches a lot of the internet tracking to see where people are going. I don't do that. I only know where people are going when I'm trying to track down an issue. So you've got a device, you can't get to, www.clorox.com. I will go onto a couple of different devices and I will look specifically for that URL and to see why it was blocked. I'm not watching where people are going all day because I wouldn't. First of all, I couldn't. That would be the most boring job on the planet. Second of all, or people, do you guys read our emails? And you always feel like saying to them, there's a woman in our building one day. You guys read all our emails, right? And I feel like saying, lady, I don't have time to read my own damn email. Why would I take the time to read yours? I don't care. I only care when there's like an accusation. Occasionally you get a teacher that gets accused of, sending an email to like a student that it says something that they shouldn't. That's when we'll open up their inbox and we'll dump everything because we're being directed. We don't care we don't care where you go. I don't care what you do. We barely have time to, use the men's room. Let alone, let's see where, let's see what website Sally's going to. She's going to, a knitting site and she's going to, a cooking site and, she's going to Kohl's.com. Nobody cares. So that's kind of the security part that someone does have access to. And, if you could get a couple of people together, now, because like I said, when I do it, my boss gets an email, and then 2 coworkers get an email. Maybe the 4 of us get together and start looking. And now, who's going to rat the other one out if it's the four of us in a room looking? So you could.
I was asking because I have thousands of pictures on Google Cloud.
Hey, so do I. Yeah, I mean, and, nothing that's not. My rule has always been, especially since because of these leaks, but even before that, don't upload a picture online that you wouldn't want to go public. Somebody wants to see me running around in the Speedo, hey, knock this out. I'll give you the darn picture. All right. So that's the chapter 1 to chapter 2 stuff. Then they talk a lot about the physical layer, because the physical layer is almost 10% of the final. So the physical layer, this is anything that the user touches. So these are your media. These are your hubs. And these are your repeaters. And again, a repeater simply regenerates a signal. So for example, I found out today, we've got these pan-tilt zoom cameras on one of our buildings, and 2 of them aren't working properly. And we found out today that the run is more than 328 feet. And the way that they got around that is in the middle of the run, they found some outlets, and they took the cable and they plugged the cable into a PoE injector, which they are essentially using as a repeater. And we're assuming that it's up in the ceiling somewhere and that they got unplugged, and that's why nothing's working. But that's where you'd see a repeater. When you've got a run that is too long, or you've got, too far between point A and point B, you will repeat the signal. The different media types, we spent quite a bit of time on the different media types. We've got optical media. Optical media has the advantage of an unlimited amount of speed. It's only limited by the technology that we have today. Again, when I first started teaching, gigabit had just come out, right? And we were like, oh my God, we went from 100 million bits per second to 1 billion bits per second. And we were like, oh man, no one's ever going to have a use for this. Gigabit, who needs anything that fast? Now you can get a gigabit internet connection to your house. You can't buy a piece of equipment, or you have a hard time finding a piece of equipment that runs at less than 1 gigabit per second. So now we have 10 gigabits and 40 gigabits and 100 gigabits. And the only thing that is limiting us from going past 100 gigabits per second is nobody has figured out how to transmit 100 billion bits per second in a way that can be received on the other side, where the other side can delineate where one message ends and where the next message begins. If you think about somebody talking really, really fast, right? And I know I talk somewhat fast, but you've got these people that can talk like, think of like an auctioneer, right? They're talking super, super fast, to the point where you might not be able to figure out where one word ends and where the next word begins. Or you'll have people that will, I worked with this person years and years and years ago. And his name was Thomas or Jerry. And he talked really, really fast. And when I first met him, he said, oh, my name is Thomas or Jerry. I'm like, wait, you want to be called Thomas or Jerry? What do you mean? Well, wait, what's your name again? Thomas or Jerry. I'm like, all right, do you want to be called Thomas or, because he was speaking so fast, I couldn't tell that was his last name. I thought he was saying Thomas or Jerry, meaning you could call me one or you could call me the other, which was a little strange because those were the cat names from the cartoon, but in any event, not what he was saying, but he was talking so fast that I couldn't determine where one word ended and where the next word began. Same thing with 100 gigabit Ethernet or 100 gigabit over optical. It's only because we can't figure out a way, I say we, I have nothing, obviously. These people are far smarter than I'll ever be. But these engineers have not figured out a way to send more than 100 billion pulses of light per second and still send them in a way where we can tell the difference between one message and the next. Will they go past that in our lifetime? No doubt. And most of you are far younger than I am. So, our lifetime's going cool. Be staggered, but in my life, I'm not definitely going past 100 because I'm sure that, the ability to do that, because remember, if I've got, let's say I've got a building here, right? And I've got a building here, and I've got, maybe I need 400 gigabits of transmission between these two buildings. Right now, I've got to have 8 separate strands because there's one strand that receives, the other strand transmits. If I can prune that down where I can go 200 gigabits per second, now I need half the capacity. So now I can either use these other cables for something else, or if I'm leasing them from a provider, I can now lease half the number of cables. So it's big business, this high speed, these high speed connections. So that's one of the big things at the physical layer is the different media forms. So again, we've got optical. Optical is what they refer to often as fiber optic cable, pulses of light. Then we've got coaxial based connections that you don't really see anymore for computing, other than internet over cable lines. What Cablevision does with their legacy Optimum service, and what Verizon Fios does to some extent, because Verizon loves to say, "Oh, we're fully fiber." Yeah, you're fully fiber until you get to the ONT. When you get to that optical network transceiver, you go coax. If anyone has Fios and you've had it for a while, look at your modem. There is a coaxial cable going into your modem. Within your house, it's coaxial. To the pole, it's fiber. And from the pole back to Verizon, it's fiber, is coaxial within your home. So the big one that we talk about with the physical layer is Ethernet, or what they call unshielded twisted pair. So remember that unshielded twisted pair has a distance limitation. It's 100 meters, 328 feet. It's susceptible to electromagnetic interference. So if something is sending out pulses of energy, it can interfere. Then there's wireless. And with wireless, we've got a number of standards. Everything comes back to this 802.11. But you've got, for Wi-Fi, you've got 802.11a, 802.11b, 802.11g, 802.11n, 802.11ac, 802.11ax. Then you've got, and I forget if it's 802.14 or 15, which is Bluetooth. Oops, I spelled Bluetooth. All right, 802.15 is Bluetooth. I don't know. 802.14 is what they call the PAN, which is a personal area network. So 802.14 is the PAN, or the personal area network. 802.15 is Bluetooth. And with these 802.11 networks, they run on 2 frequencies. Or primarily they run on 2 frequencies, because 802.11ax will also run at I want to say it's 6 gigahertz. I could be wrong. You know, 211AX is 6 gigahertz. So traditional Wi-Fi ran at 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz. The biggest thing to remember about Wi-Fi. It is a shared medium, not shared by the ESSID. Remember that all of your networks have a name to them. Usually it's just abbreviated as SSID. So, that's the name of the network that you connect to. That's the name that shows up on your device. I can be on the same channel as somebody else's network. We share the bandwidth based on the channel, not based on the name. So if I'm using channel 6 and my neighbor is using channel 6, regardless of the fact that we have 2 different network names, we have 2 different security passwords, we may even have different types of security, we are both contending for bandwidth. So Wi-Fi is shared. Wi-Fi is half duplex, meaning that only one device can transmit at a time. Wi-Fi uses primarily two frequencies. We use 2.4 gigahertz, which in the United States is limited to 11 channels. However, only 3 are usable. We can use channels 1, 6, and 11. And the reason for that is because the channels need to be 20 megahertz wide, and each of these 11 channels is only 5 megahertz, so we need to use 4 of them in order to get a signal. Then there's 5 gigahertz. 5 gigahertz, there's a lot more channels. They're already spaced 4 apart. And the advantage of 5 gigahertz is it's a lot faster. So the rule is the higher the frequency, the faster the connection, but the shorter the distance. And I used to compare it to AM and FM radio. You know, AM radio, the quality isn't as good. You're not going to get that full fidelity sound that you get with FM radio, but AM radio goes like forever and a day, right? I've gotten 10-10 winds from New York all the way up by Foxwoods in Connecticut. Unlike an FM station, where as soon as you're out of the area, your signal begins to drop off considerably. It's why WBAB, that broadcasts out of Babylon, why they have 2 different stations, because as you go further out east, you can't pick them up. So they have a second station that they broadcast. And you know, if you ever, back in the day, if you ever listened to FM radio, as soon as you got outside this area, it dropped right off. Where AM would keep going and going and going. AM radio, not as good, but goes a lot further. So the higher the frequency, the faster the connection, but the shorter the distance. Which is why 6 gigahertz is great, except it's not going to go very far at all. Sorry, this cup is leaking on my face. Remember the differences between half duplex and full duplex? Half duplex, only one device can talk at a time. Full duplex, you know, we get 2-way transactions. Switches allow us to do full duplex. Then there's some of the stuff that comes with switches. Switches allow us to create collision domains, because prior to switching, everything was one collision domain, meaning anytime any device transmitted, every other device had the potential, if they transmitted, to collide with that data. Switches prevent that by buffering the signal. So if I've got 2 devices connected to a switch and they both want to talk to, well, 3 devices connected to a switch, A and B want to talk to C. If A and B were to transmit at the exact same millisecond, the switch would buffer one of those and let the other one go through, and then pass the first one. And it happens so quickly we don't even realize it's happening. You know, it happens like that. Remember that switches store a MAC address table. They know where every device is connected. Thus, they can make forwarding decisions very quickly, and they can send only to the device that the frame is intended for, not every device on the network. Remember the concept of flooding the frame. Flooding the frame occurs when a switch doesn't have the MAC address of the destination device in the MAC address table, or what they used to refer to as the CAM table. This one's very important. A flood is not a broadcast. A broadcast goes to a special address. A flood does not. A flood is just, we don't know what port this goes to, so we're going to send it out all ports, except the originating port. A broadcast, that goes to every device. That goes to a special address that all devices listen to, the MAC address of 12x. So you've got these collision avoidance methods. Back to that chart. You've got these collision avoidance methods. They likely will not ask you which one does what, but we've got the two methods. They are CSMA, both begin with CSMA. You've got CA and CD. CA is collision avoidance. CD is collision detection. Remember, one signals its intent to transmit, and then if that doesn't collide, it transmits. The other one simply listens, and if it doesn't see anything on the wire, it transmits. Remember that you've got those two domains. I know I spoke about this a second ago. You've got those two domains. You've got a collision domain. This is created at each switch port. Then you've got broadcast domains. This is created at each router interface. There is one important thing to remember. A router interface has a switching function. Meaning, each router interface will also create a collision domain. And they used to ask a question about that. They haven't in a long time. But just in case. All right. Make sure you remember the key things. You know, there's a couple of those things that I said, you know, this is a rule, and you must remember this rule. The rule for physical versus logical addressing. So, two devices on the same network. They use physical addressing. Two devices on a different network. Oops. They use logical addressing, which again is an IP address in our case. Used to be different addresses, but we don't care about them. So when a device that's on the same physical network as another device only knows the logical address, there's a function in it, there's a routine that it does, right? And an example of why you'd want to use this routine, my laptop wants to print to my printer. My laptop knows the IP address or the logical address of my printer, does not know the physical address. So a device will ARP. Remember, ARP is the address resolution protocol to find the physical when we know the logical. Remember the easiest way to identify an ARP, you're looking for a message that says who has the address 192.168.1.4, and the device at 192.168.1.4 will reply back 192.168.1.4 is at, and it will list its physical address. Now your device will add that to its ARP cache, and from that point forward can talk to that device based on its ARP cache. Now, it's a good idea, only because we're going to be out of time in a few minutes, so I'll just kind of list the rest of the stuff to make sure you kind of take a look at. Make sure you're taking a look at the neighbor discovery process for IP version 6. It's a quick read. You could probably find a quick video that you could just listen to. So IPv6, you've got to know how the prefixes work. You've got to know those special addresses. So you've got the FE80 addresses. Those are linked local addresses. You've got the FFO2 addresses, ::1, and FFO2, ::2. FFO2, ::1 is all nodes. FFO2, ::2 is all routers. You've got ::1 or your loop back. You've got ::. You also need to know how the neighbor discovery works. We will, before we do the final next time, I will do one last quick review on the initial settings, because that's a big one that Cisco, what the different modes are. If anyone has any other questions prior to that, please let me know, and I'll, I can either explain them in an email or I'll explain them on Monday. It used to be about 50 questions.
Multiple choices or?
Yeah, there's different. There's multiple choice. There's what they call multiple choice single answer, multiple choice multi-answer. There's a couple of fill-ins, and then they have like these drag and drop questions where they give you a list of 5 things on the left, 5 things on the right, and you've got to drag and drop them in order to like they'd say, they'd have like broadcast domain, collision domain, MAC address table, and then something else. And they have, what a router creates, what a switch creates, what a switch uses to make forwarding decisions, and then something else. And you just drag them onto each other.
Are you gonna upload so they're uploading a example test?
The practice final is almost exactly, which I'm gonna
How long is it? How long will it get?